Probably one of the most frequently asked questions I get asked is, where do I place certain effects within the effects chain? And, generally there aren't any hard, fast rules concerning where you put effects in the effects chain. It generally comes down to, the type of sound you're trying to build, and, some effects sound much different before or after other effects. So there are a couple of guidelines that I do try to stick to, though, and probably my number one rule is to never put delay or reverbs before a noise suppressor. And I kind of touched on this in the previous chapter when we talked about noise suppressors. You don't want the subtle decay and delay repeats to be cut off prematurely by a noise suppressor. So if you placed it before a noise suppressor, as the threshold of the level of those decay repeats fade out, the noise suppressor will cut them off. This doesn't sound very natural. So if you place those effects after the noise suppressor, basically it'll leave it intact and they'll decay nice and naturally. Things like an overdrive will generally always go before a preamp, because you're driving the preamp with the overdrive, not vice versa. So always put an overdrive before a preamp. As for most other effects, it's really up to you where you think it sounds best. So let's look at a bit of a practical demonstration and just see basically how certain effects can be routed, and some of the new enhancements of the GT10's effects chain. So for the purposes of this demonstration, I've just played a basic distorted rhythm into the phrase loop of the GT10, and I'll just play that now. Now, let's have a look at what we've got here. Now, this first icon represents the start of the effects chain, the guitar, basically the input of the guitar. So from there, the guitar passes through to the first effects block within the chain. Now, in this case, I've got the wah here, okay, which then in turn goes to the next effect, to the next, so on and so forth. This type of effects chain is what's known as a series effects chain, and it works in the same way as say a line of stomp boxes, in that your guitar goes into the first one, which then goes into the next, and so on. So I've got wah flashing now. If I press play and engage the wah, okay, so that wah is behaving in a traditional wah type of way. So traditionally, a wah would be placed at the start of the effects chain, but if I placed it at the end of the effects chain so that all the effects are passing through it, it has a very different sound. And I'm going to demonstrate that by just playing, and then in real time, I'll shift the wah to the end of the chain, and you'll hear the difference it has. Okay, here we go. So you can see how it's almost working more like a filter. So it's actually, I guess, the same kind of concept that they use in a lot of dance music, where they're using a filter to filter out like a broad range of frequencies. So that's because all the effects in this case are passing through the wah, and then the wah is actually controlling the filtering of the sound of everything. Whereas at the start of the chain, and we'll have a listen to that again. This is still at the end of the chain. So you can hear a massive difference there. The same is true for a lot of effects, and you may very well like the wah to filter, like we did where it was placed at the end of the effects chain. Again, it's totally up to you. Okay, there's no right or wrong way here. So as you're programming your patches and you're placing effects, experiment with them in different parts of the chain. Because, your patch can take on a very different sound dependent on where the effect is actually placed. So let's just take this effects chain chapter just a little bit further and have a look at a bit more about how the parallel part of the effects chain works. And in this case, I've got 2 channels set up. Here I'm using preamp B, which is a clean preamp with a compressor. I've got delay, chorus and reverb on there. Now if I was to press to the other channel, so I've got a dirty preamp with the Univibe on it. So let me just go into the effects chain itself. And let's have a look at the parallel part of the effects loop here and see what's going on. Okay, so my first preamp goes into a noise suppressor and then into the effects block 1. Now, as I change channels, in fact, let me just step back once. As I change channels, it's going from this part of the effects chain and it's switching directly over here. Now, with previous models of the GT units, like the GT6 and the GT8, I would have to program control pedals or different patches to be able to change 2 totally independent effects sounds like that. But with the GT10, I simply just place them in 2 separate paths. So channel A, my dirty preamp, goes into the noise suppressor and then into the Univibe. And then when I hit channel B, it's switching to this channel now, and it's going to a clean preamp, which goes into the noise suppressor, compressor, chorus, reverb and delay.